The four resources that we have in the community that we're going to talk about today is our type scale worksheet, design system interview, component capture kit, and governance model. I'm Billy Sweetman. I'm head of design here at Headway. I just really enjoy building and teaching design systems to designers, and very thankful that I get the opportunity to share a bunch of our process and things that we do here at Headway with everyone out there on the internet learning design. This is part of our design systems in Figma course. So you don't need to have used the course to use these resources. They're all free in the community. But if you really want to unpack how we build out design systems in Figma from like a designer's point of view, the whole design team here at Headway put a really great course together. It's available at shipwright.design. So definitely feel free to check that out. We also have some free YouTube videos about design systems that you can check out on our YouTube page. So just lots of resources out there, depending on what you're looking for. All of these resources are free in the community. Just search Headway on the Figma community. We've got some other resources out there as well, like UX audit templates, building customer journey maps, a brand guideline template, and then of course our free UI kit and design system starter kit, which really is foundational for getting a design system up and running. But today we are going to be talking about four specific resources that we have on the community. So there's a lot of different ways to go about building out design systems, right? A lot of people think it's just about building out the components and building out the right design pieces and making sure everything's connected and functioning and seamless token automation all the way through. While that is true, really a lot of the work is about connecting our team and getting that team alignment. And these resources are really focused about getting that team alignment. Like I said, we got four of them here. We have our design system interview template, which is really help you interview each member on your team to find out what they actually need. We have our component capture kit. This is a way for us to really understand the current state of our design and see where things are. We have our governance model, which will help us define out how we contribute to a design system as a team. What are some of the rules that we have in place? And then we have a type scale worksheet, which isn't explicitly needed for the design system work. It can be used for other design projects as well, but it's super helpful when we're defining out tokens and things like that. The first one we're going to dive into is the design system interview template that we have here. So we use the design system interview template when we're really starting out our design system or during a rollout of a design system. This interview template is really built out where you can change the questions and change everything in here to be used for any sort of design interview. But we really use this for design system interviews the most. And it's kind of a framework for leveraging those interviews. We're going to kind of dive in and unpack how we can use it, how we can change it and update it for what we need. So each one of our resources that we build out will come with a little guide here on how to use those resources. So this is the design interview template. And we have a little knowledge center here, which will kind of just talk about a little bit how to use this, and then links to other things that we think are valuable for folks who are going through this process. So here we're linking into our Intro to Design and Systems YouTube video, and then some of the other resources that you might be using after this interview. So the way we kind of built out our interview templates, or the way we think about it, is we have the set of interviews, and we want to really review this before we go and do a design system interview. We might not have a design system yet, and we're kind of thinking about how can we implement a design system at our company, and we want to sit down and interview the designers, the developers, maybe the product owners, different stakeholders, and really go through this interview. So we'll have multiple interviews in this FigJam file, all captured here. We'll give the participant name and role. We'll identify them there. If we're doing it over Zoom, we might have a screenshot of them up here so we can kind of remember who we talked to. You know, sometimes it's easier to put a name when we have a face there. And then we break up our questions into categories. So here you can see the default template has tooling, workflow, standards and approval, design, development, design systems, and then sort of a follow-up for anything else, catch-all here. And this is the generic template that we'll go through. But like I said, we'll update this based on what is the outcome of the interview we're trying to get. If we're just starting out with a design system effort and we've never used a design system, we might remove this category here and not answer any of those questions there. And we might have different questions in there that we might add. When we are going through the interview, what we do is we usually, best practice is to have two interviewers on each interview. We'll have one person asking the questions and sort of guiding the interview in the Zoom call if we're doing it on Zoom, and then somebody else who's there taking notes, right? So somebody's asking, what tools are you currently working in? And as the interviewee responds, our other designer who will be on this call will be capturing all the notes and kind of going through here and adding different elements here. The nice thing about doing this is we might hear something that we want to ask a question about or a follow-up question about that the interviewee might not catch. So we can just duplicate these and sort of work through these. And as we go in through the categories, we can pre-stage new questions sort of organically as we're going, which is kind of a cool little thing when we do the interview capture in a tool like FigJam instead of doing something in a little bit more linear fashion like a Notion or even a Google Drive. Like I said before, a lot of these are predefined questions, which really help us kind of work through those flows. So the next thing would be workflow, talk us through your current workflow. We like to break out questions like this so we can kind of get a sense of how people are feeling about different things and things that they mentioned there and kind of pre-categorize some of that stuff. It helps us when we get to reviewing all the interview feedback. We have that available there as well. Another thing that's super helpful when doing, if you're recording your interviews and you're putting these, for example, on a tool like Loom or another video hosting platform that has the ability to do timestamp starting links, so a link that will start a specific timestamp, we can put that right in here as well so that when we get to these questions and we're kind of reviewing this and we're coming up with different things that we want to capture, we might want to re-listen to a little bit of what they said. Maybe a note card wasn't clear and things like that. So we can add those in there. A lot of these questions are really beneficial when we work through the full design system process, and that's why we put them in this template. Some of the biggest ones that we try to capture is like, how do we capture standards and approvals? Like, how does your team currently handle standards, design and code rules? Like, where is your documentation stored? Things like that. And this really contributes into the governance model or the contribution model, documentation, or workflow that we put together. So this is all really helpful. Good set of default questions in here. Very easy to remix this however you want. And we really want to use this as a foundational starting piece. And then, as you're going through your interview, you might change this up a little bit and remix it and make it your own. So that's our design system interview template. And like I said, available in the Figma community. Definitely check it out. It's super helpful, and we use it for all of our design system interviews that we go through. The next element or the next resource that we're going to talk about is like our component capture kit. This is another super beneficial resource that we use, especially when we're working through a design system build for a product that already exists. So you already have a product built, or you already have a marketing site done. You might be using this template for that. We'll use it in UX audit. So when we're auditing the UX of a product, we'll also be capturing the different components and things like that. And this is really valuable when presenting to stakeholders. If you are ever thinking about like, how do I present the need for a design system to stakeholders, showing them the current state of the design world through this component capture kit is super, super helpful, because it kind of shows them maybe some of the inefficiencies that are currently being put out there with the design. And we'll kind of go through and show you how that can work there. Just like our other resources, we have a guide kind of showing you how to do it. But I think this picture up top kind of shows how it needs to be done, right? It's just like Pokemon, right? We want to capture all the components on our design here. And we'll do this as a team. So we'll have multiple folks kind of going through the team or going through the site or the product, capturing different things and kind of dropping them in here together. We've broken this out to kind of follow the atomic design pattern that Brad Frost kind of coined. So you'll notice we'll have like tokens up at the top, and then atoms, so things like buttons or drop downs, really those small design components, molecules, things that are a little bit more advanced, organisms, and then grids and layouts. And you can add to this and you can change the way you want it to function, whatever works best for your team. We just think of design systems in this way, so this works best for us. So the way we would go about doing this is, and I've pre-staged this with a screenshot here that we can kind of zoom in and see. So this is Amazon's product page for a basketball hoop outdoor. And what we would do is we would go through and really just capture a bunch of screenshots and drop them in those different categories. So I might go through this page and capture in all the different button states. That might be the thing that I'm looking for, is I'm capturing all the buttons, maybe different cards, maybe different gallery layouts, so something like this. And what we would do is we would drop those into the corresponding areas. So for example, and I've kind of pre-done this already, is I've got a bunch of, if you just go and look at the different button elements on this page here, you can start to see there's quite a variety of different buttons. And actually this is a drop down, so we can move this here, and I can kind of zoom in here because these do get kind of small. And so we kind of captured all those different buttons, and then you'll start to notice things like, oh, is this a button, or does this go on a, maybe this is a snack bar or a bottom alert type thing. And we're going to really go through and just kind of capture all those different elements, right? We might capture the different type styles that are being used. I think this is, did I put in the right, yep, type style. So this is from the brand. You kind of caught that up at the top there. Here's another type style that we have. We might figure out where we've got alerts or modals and different media galleries, things like that. So we really want to kind of capture where all of these elements would go and really start to figure out or show where the more complicated pieces are too, right? So I'm going to drop this screenshot in here. Here we've got sort of a gallery component or a carousel, so we'll throw that over there. And this is really helpful because, like I said before, you're going to start to see where the current state of your product design is. And even if you're not building a design system, this is helpful to find areas where you can unify that system and really find a way to be like, oh, hey, we were using an old style of a button on these pages, so maybe we can clean this up. So this is a really good template, really good process to go through as a team. And like I said, we include this in the UX audit as well, because a lot of times when we're doing UX audits, we're also doing sort of a review of the overall design system and how it's applied, whether there's an active system or not. But like I said, it's super beneficial. Awesome. Well, the next resource that we're going to talk about is the governance model or contribution model. So this is a super beneficial template when we are thinking about how do we contribute or how do we manage contributions to our design system, and how do we even make the decisions about what needs to be added and what doesn't need to be added. So we use this throughout the entire design system creation, not just at the end. If you save documentation and things like that to the end, it's probably not going to get done. So it's good to just be thinking about it the whole time. And this is super helpful for educating new team members on building out their individual process and understanding the design system and how they can contribute and how the different rules and maybe guidelines and definitions are set up. So we're going to jump into here. Like I said before, same thing. We've got a little knowledge center, kind of how to unpack this and kind of talking about sort of the way we think about this. And the way we think about the governance model is it's really a framework of 4 categories, and we broke it up into 4 based on different models that we've looked at and different governance and contribution models we've seen and kind of unpacked. And this is a boilerplate, so it's framed up with different questions. So you can go in there and ask yourself some questions as you're going through this and make those adjustments as you're kind of working through. So, but like I said before, we broke it up into these 4 specific categories. We have our decision area. So what is the decision tree or the flow that I go through to make an actual decision? So for example, if I zoom in here, it's like, does this component already exist? Yes or no. If it does it meet all requirements? No. Then we're going to unpack the needed requirements and present them to the team. Does this component, is it a new component or a modification? If it's new, does this component scale across different products or screens, right? So like, what are some of the things that we can go through as designers as we're asking the design system team or the design system, or as we're asking everyone who's contributing to the design system, do we need this component or not? So that's part of the decision area. The next one is the design area, and we've unpacked the design as sort of separate because one of the things that we see in a lot of teams is design is in charge of building out a component and is in charge of thinking about of all the elements first before development gets involved, right? So we broke this out here. Design might be building this in their UI kit. They're mocking it up with all the different states. They're going to review the component with the development team, and they're going to then see if it is sort of approved by the development team, and then it'll go over to the development side, which is the next category that we think about, is the development side of that. And then in here, might be where we're creating that branch in Figma and we're building that final component. Here we're conceptually working through what it might look like, what it needs, what are the different states, and then here we're actually building that final piece. And development's building their component in the sandbox, things like that. We're testing it. And then we're documenting the component, the properties, usage guidelines, animations, different things that we might want to document. Then we're going to get sign off. And then we go to the last part, which is delivery. And delivery is like publishing it to the design kit, publishing it live components out to our sandbox environment or to our live coded library, and then communicating with the team to the different links and components and documentation, making sure that the team's aware of that. Right. So this is a really simple breakdown of a governance flow, but it's built so that you can customize it for your team and what does your team actually need. So for example, what we've noticed with a lot of our clients and a lot of design system builds is the design team's a lot more involved here with the early stage of a component than they are when it gets into development. So honestly, like this actually can get removed from here, because what design is going to do is they are going to create a branch in Figma and they are going to build that component, right? Figma has branching, so we notice this with a lot of organizations. So they create a branch with Figma, and what we might put in here is follow branching guidelines. And those branching guidelines, let's zoom in. Branching guidelines might have a link somewhere. So then we would add that link, and we'll just do google.com for now, right? So we're going to do that there. And we'll make sure that we have that. And so what our design team is going to do is they're going to mock up the component in all the states. They're going to review the component, maybe with the development team. But instead of mocking up the component in all the states in sort of isolation, we're just going to do this in the branch that we've created. So this is actually going to get moved over here. And we're going to delete some of these connectors. And this is based on like a specific client that we've worked with and kind of how they function and their design system team works after discussion. So we're going to move this connector down here to this. So design team is going to create a branch in Figma. They're going to follow the branching guidelines. Then we're going to mock up all the components and the states. And then in this specific instance, and I'll just duplicate this because for simplicity's sake, once the component is done, the design team will review with design system team group. And then we'll move this. Are there any changes down here? I'll delete this little line here, right? And we'll start to ask these questions and unpack this flow. And if there are changes, we'll move it back up here, and then we'll add a yes. And actually, that's not going to go to the branch. It's going to go up here to the mockup. So we'll move this out here. And then if there aren't any changes, it's going to move on. And so then we'll go through and kind of clean this up. And this is our new design process. And this might change, right? So like the idea of updating this as we go is that this might change because different needs might happen, right? When we get into the decision area, there might be parts where we now have to think about multi-tier design system, right? So then we have to ask more questions and things like that. So this might evolve, and you might have different models depending on how big your design system is or how big your design system team is. So like I said, this is a super beneficial diagram to go through and really unpack with your team. And using that design system interview that we talked about earlier, you're going to find a bunch of things that you might impart in here based on the questions you're asking. You might not know things about your process that are currently in place that you can start to map out and put that in here as well. We like to link to all of our documentation too, so that's really nice way to link back out to specific documentation. So for example, if we have branching rules written in a Notion document, or in the design area, we might have an accessibility check. So we might go, hey, link to all of our accessibility question or documentation, or we might have token documentation hosted in something like Zero Height, things like that. We might have those links in here as well as we go through, because this is a good resource for someone to understand the full process and really understand where all the documentation is for that process. Awesome. Cool. And the last sort of resource that we have is like our type scale worksheet. Like I said before, we use a lot when we're working on defining out our type scale, really understanding different type combinations, and we'll also use this when defining out type tokens. Now, we'll use this for design systems. We'll also use this for just regular product design as we're kind of going through an exploration phase, or we want to adjust the scale across the board, and we just want to see how different types work with each other and things like that. So in this one, this is not a FigJam template, so it is a little bit different. And the way this is kind of set up is we have our knowledge center in here and kind of talks a little bit about this type scale worksheet and how to use it. We have some local components that we've set up here that are really used to just house the structure and things like that, and how those can actually function. Then up here, we have the templates, and these templates are set up to have the different 16 pixel base size scales and 14 pixel base size scales that we use the most. You might use different ones, but these are the ones that we kind of use the most. And these are all defined out from modularscale.com. There's a few other type scale tools you can use to really see these different scales. So for example, we've got minor second in here. You see all of the H values, body, button, some other ones here called out like label, and then we have the scale value in here. In these elements, each one of these is set to a type style. So those are defined in here so that we can easily reset these if for some reason something went wrong. But we've gone through and kind of categorized these. We've got like ones that are best for mobile apps, some that are good for like web apps, and then obviously marketing sites and things like that. And then we have a 14 pixel base size template as well that's in here. Now, these are all like our default templates, and we don't really mess around with these too much. We go in the working space. And so in the working space, we have these laid out sort of in this horizontal view, so you can really kind of get some comparisons on how those are going to look in your designs. Same thing with the 14 pixel base, so we can kind of see how those look. And really the way we would go about adjusting these is, for example, let's say golden section. We're going to use this one, which has a scale of 1.618, and we would duplicate this underneath here, and then we would detach this component. And then we would go through and take a look at all of these different values. Now, none of these are linked to the type styles because we want to be able to change and mess around with these, right? For example, let's say we're working on a marketing site and we want to use Playfair display for our headings. We can put that in there. And then we want to, this is just enter. So we want to try like Open Sans, and we can kind of see what that looks like. And we can start to set these up next to each other so we can start having conversations about the different types that we want to use. For example, we can switch these out fairly quickly. Let's do IBM. We can start to see different combinations and how those would look in those scales. We picked out the most, the headings, 4 levels here, a couple of key like body, button, paragraph 2, label or subtitle. We picked out the ones that we use the most, but you might need another one. And so there's kind of a cool little trick you can do if you copy one of these headings, because you might need another level up. Maybe you need a a display 1 value here. And you want to adjust that scale. You could go to modular scale and go take a look at that, but this little trick actually works pretty well, where you just take your current size that you have from the previous value and just multiply it by the 1.618, and that'll give you the next size up. So we have 177.45. Figma does its little rounding thing, but this is very helpful for just getting the next size up. And then line height, you can do something like this, where, if you wanted to get and actually we'll do 22 times 8. If you wanted to get the line height adjusted, and actually I would probably do 23 times 8. You can get those adjustments in there by just doing that multiplication. And you notice our line height isn't set to the traditional 1.2 or 1.5 multiplication. We use like the 8-pixel grid for a lot of our line heights. So that's just something that works for us, but you can really adjust it however you want. So this will get used, like I said, early on in our process when we're going through and looking through the different conceptual directions and how we want to figure out the type that we want to use. And then we'll also use this when we're defining out a type scale for our design system. We'll then copy and paste what we settle on, what we've had a discussion on, into our UI kit, and we'll use that to define out all of our tokens and things like that. Well, those are the 4 kits or 4 templates that we have. Each one of those has sort of a unique application in the design system process that is super helpful when going through the process. We've kind of collected all of these things, and we use these in everything that we do. And if you do use any of these or download them, we're definitely looking forward to any feedback that you might have of adjustments or things that work best for you or didn't work for you, as we're trying to build really the best resources that we can for design systems and for designers working through their different product designs.